What's up, everybody? It's Punk Rock Talk, episode 12. Today, my guests will be Tony and Michelle Cozzaglio. They are the promoters for Punx Unite Fest, happening this July in Denver, Colorado. But that's not all they're involved with. They do a lot for the scene. They're involved in multiple endeavors that are really interesting and a lot of fun. So we're going to talk about all those things, or at least, hopefully we can talk about all those things. At least a little bit of each thing. It is Defiance playing right now on our Spotify playlist, Rebellion Noise 2022. If you're not following our Spotify, you need to get on there and do it. We update this playlist every Monday with music that correlates with whoever we're going to be interviewing on Punk Rock Talk that Wednesday. So, it's fun because it's fresh. Every Monday it gets updated. So you might discover some bands that you haven't heard of yet. Or hear some tracks from some favorite bands that you haven't listened to in a while. If you've missed an episode of Punk Rock Talk, don't worry. We update our YouTube channel with the latest episode every Thursday. So if you've missed an episode, it's up on our YouTube channel right now. So head to our YouTube and subscribe. There's also other content of the Havoc that we're always in the middle of something preparing to upload to YouTube. Also, in the realm of the Havoc, we just announced a couple of weeks ago our first show back in 8 years. And our first show since we announced our reunion. The last time we played was in 2014, and it wasn't a full-fledged reunion, it was just a one-off show. That's happening April 29th in Los Angeles, California. If you're a local to Southern California, you're not going to want to miss it. We've got a badass lineup for that show. We're also shooting a music video at that show. So, if you want to come and be on camera, make sure you're there when the doors open. Plus, you want to be there to support all the bands anyway. It's Women's History Month. We've been celebrating all month here on Punk Rock Talk. Every episode this month we've had a female guest, with the exception of the first episode because of technical issues. So, although it's been all female guests, today's a little bit different because we've got a power couple, really. And we're going to get both their perspectives on a lot of things in the scene. Before I bring them on, if you have questions for this segment, tap that question mark icon on your screen so that you can submit the question. Don't put it in the comments section. It gets lost there. I won't see it. And also, and lastly, this episode and every episode of Punk Rock Talk is brought to you by Dead and Buried merchandise. Dead and Buried Inc. If you're in a band and you need merch, they are your source. You can find them here on Instagram at Dead and Buried Inc. That's INC, not INK. Or at deadandburiedinc.com. You can contact them for a quote for merch that you'd like to have printed. There's also merch for sale by different bands on their website, including the Havocs. So check that out. And stick around till the end of this episode when I will announce next week's guest. You don't want to miss that either. Let's go ahead and get Tony and Michelle on here. And again, if you've got questions, go ahead and tap that question to submit them. The sooner the better. Okay. We should have them on here in just any moment. There we go. Hi, guys. How are you?
Oh, doing all right. Can't complain at all.
Awesome. I was telling the audience during the intro that although you guys are known for being promoters of Punx Unite Fest, that is just one of many things that you're involved with. And I definitely would like to get into each of those things at least a little bit. But I think the thing that I'd like to start with, because I love talking about the humanity of our guests. A lot of people are familiar with our guests and what they're attached to, if it's a band or whatever, but they might not know the human side of them. And you guys are like a power couple. How did this come together for you guys? Did you have the entrepreneurial spirit, like both of you, and that was kind of like what clicked for your relationship? Or Tony, did you just drag Michelle along, or was it the vice versa? How did this all come together for you guys?
I almost feel like it was like maybe that entrepreneurial spirit was like hidden, and then we got together and it just exploded. Because before we got together, maybe I had like ideas and vice versa, but then we got together and it was like the support from him for my ideas and then my support for his ideas. It just like fucking exploded, basically.
Yeah, I think we complement each other pretty well on things. And, you know, so like, for example, maybe Michelle, previous to us being together, maybe Michelle would have ideas, but for whatever reason wouldn't move forward with them. And I'm like the opposite, where I was doing a bunch of stuff, but I just wasn't good at it.
Oh, whatever.
and so, you know, like having her involved really, made it so things could actually happen.
So it sounds like you guys pretty much just bring out the best in one another.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's a sign of a good relationship.
I think so too, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking from personal experience with my wife, you know, she basically highlighted everything about me that was like, you're a fucking asshole. And I was like, yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Because all my other relationships have failed. It's got to be me.
Right.
No, I'm kind of kidding, but kind of serious at the same time. But in our relationship, it's very much the same way. We know how to be open and honest with each other, but be supportive. And, you know, I have to credit her for a lot of what has gone right in my life in the last few years. And it's really awesome that you guys are able to do so much. And you know, some people might not know what all you're involved with. So I'd like to educate them a little bit. Right now we're going live from the Boulevard Trash Instagram page, which is your record store in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
It's an awesome spot. I've been there. If you're ever in Oklahoma, you guys definitely need to go there. The Oddities and Curiosities Expo, which kind of makes Punx Unite Fest just look tiny in comparison as far as numbers are concerned. I mean, you guys have got hundreds of vendors and thousands of attendees at each event, and you do it all over the country. I mean, it's like Tony and I were joking about this a little while ago. It's like you're on tour all the time, just not in a band.
Yeah.
Totally. 100%.
And then you guys have Boomtown Tees. So you've got a silk screening business. And then Punk Rock Flea Market, which is kind of, I think, what kind of started, maybe it was kind of the catalyst for Oddities and Curiosities Expo.
Definitely, yeah.
And then Tony, you're in the wheels, which if anybody watching is not familiar, they're a lot of fun, and it's like a silly string party, and the tunes are awesome. So check them out. But let's talk about the Oddities and Curiosities Expo, because that has me literally just curious. You know, how did that all come together for you guys, and how did you grow it to what it is today?
So we started it in 2017, and we had been doing the Tulsa Punk Rock Flea Market before, and we did one in Denver, and we did one in Austin. And the idea for the Oddities and Curiosities Expo came from, like, we had some Oddities vendors at the punk rock flea market shows, and we've both always just collected weird things, just, we're punks, so always weird shit.
Yeah.
So
lots of skulls and stuff around,
so it was kind of like a really small idea where it was like, oh, well, what if there was an event that was just focusing on that side of things? So we took out the records and the music style vendors, and we just had creepy Halloween related items, oddities, antiques, stuff like that. And so I organized one here in Tulsa at this extremely small American Legion. I don't know the square footage of it, but it was
less than maybe 5,000 square feet.
Yeah. So anyway, there was maybe 40 vendors, maybe, and thousands of people came. And a huge line, so packed you couldn't even move. And I was like, oh, okay. I thought this was going to be small compared to the punk rock flea markets here, but it was way bigger. So we took it and ran with it. And I was like, I don't know, maybe Denver would like this. And we have so many friends in Denver. We've always used it as our second home base with events, because we knew oh, we have friends, at least we know they'll come.
We go there often. It's a home away from home, So.
Yeah. So we tried it, and it was even bigger than Tulsa, of course. Tulsa's smaller. And then really just from there, I just wanted to dive in head first. And 2018 we had 8 cities, and 2019 we had 16 cities. 2020 we had 26 scheduled, and then COVID ruined our lives for a year. and then this last year we had 25, and this year we have 25, I think. So it exploded, and it started from just a really small idea that I did not think would actually turn into anything at all.
Michelle, what were you doing for work prior to that?
So for years I worked at just call centers. I worked at AT&T, find money, and I could look however I wanted. They didn't care if I had colorful hair or whatever, because I didn't see people. So I worked in that industry for a long time, and I hated it. And so we started doing this, and I was like, well, I think I kind of don't want to do this anymore. And then I started bartending. I quit the corporate bullshit and started bartending, and it gave me more availability to start working on the computer more and booking vendors. And he was already bartending, so our availability in general was a little bit more open.
Michelle's such she's so good at organizational management sort of stuff. And so I think, I had been bartending for years at the point where she finally got fed up with AT&T enough and left. And so we got her lined up with a bar that I was working at, and I had been working at since it had opened. And I think Michelle worked there for a couple weeks before she was my boss. And,
I can't help it. I exceed.
And it was a music venue. So through that, we were already booking a lot of bands and that sort of stuff there anyway. And we did a couple punk rock flea markets in the parking lot of that bar and all that. And so it all just kind of, her leaving the corporate America definitely opened up our free time for doing more fun stuff.
Yeah.
That's really cool, because it sounds like, your life just went kind of in this whole unexpected direction.
Yeah.
And you're just hanging on for the ride, and it's just grown and grown. I can't imagine how exciting that must feel.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I worked in the corporate setting for so long. When I was younger, I just really didn't want to work for anyone else again. And So whenever we started doing this, I mean, that's why we just like dove in. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to work for anyone else. I don't want anyone else to tell me when I have to be there. I want to do my own thing. And I mean, it's turned out great. Like we get to work within punk and within the Oddities world, which is very, very close to being
similar.
the same thing. so yeah, it's pretty awesome. I have no regrets about that.
So with you guys traveling so much, I'm curious, you know, how you continue to manage things that you have here at home with your record store and your silkscreen business, which I know is kind of like newer for you guys. It's not a new business. It's one that you acquired.
Yeah.
But having to manage your time well, I'm sure it gets really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. We have some really awesome managers though at both Boulevard and at Boomtown Tees. So they really help keep things going while we're gone. I mean, overall, we have like an awesome team.
I think we're super lucky that, you know, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg sort of situation, whereas, you know, through doing these things, we've been able to work for ourselves and not have bosses. That being said, we've all had terrible bosses and all that. And so, you know, we very proactively have always like hired within our friends and all that. And so I think we're lucky that I think a lot of our friends that work for us now, but with us really, are just as involved and like excited about the things that we're doing as we are, because they're all just as passionate about music and all that. So yeah, it all works out.
Yeah.
You know, everyone gets to hang out. You know, whenever we come in, if anything, I need to rein myself in to make sure I get back to work, because it's so easy to just get caught up talking with all your friends.
Yeah. Come up and there's like 5 people up here already, and then we're just talking. I'm like,
Yeah.
I haven't got the MC done.
I need to get on my computer.
I think that's super awesome. You know, it's like the culture that you have really created for yourselves and for all of your friends. Sounds like it's, you know, really rooted in rock and roll, you know, in that mindset, which is fucking awesome. And with the record store, you know, we're kind of in this era now where they're few and far between. Was that kind of always a dream of yours, Tony? Or how did that all come together?
I think that that's a perfect example of us kind of complementing each other well. And, you know, I had moved, Michelle and I had met, and we started kind of talking, dating long distance. One thing led to another. I ended up moving to Tulsa, and Boulevard Trash was really like the first project of ours that we took on. And I mean, when it started, it legitimately was just a folding table that we'd set up to distro records at DIY punk shows that we'd set up. And so that really has just kind of snowballed as a passion project forever. And so we get super excited every time that it kind of hits a new milestone or something like that. You know, not too long ago, we were able to finally bring on our friend Ryan to manage full time over there. And even that's great because he's excited. He loves music and he loves it, loves the shop. And for us, we're like, man, it like has real, like it's got like a staff now. That's crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So on this show, we've talked a lot about the ritual of finding new records and kind of where it goes from there, taking it home and opening it up and looking at all the artwork and smelling the vinyl and, you know, throwing it onto your record player and all of that. And I was really excited to see the last time you and I hung out was at the Casualty show in Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I think it was the next day or maybe even late that night, I saw on Instagram that the guys were in your store going through that same ritual process that we always talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, like, just fucking cool for you to, you know, see these guys, you know, from bands that we've kind of all grown up with go through that process, you know, like how we all have, and, you know, the other people that have come to the store that you didn't know were going to come in, and you're just like, holy shit, so-and-so was here.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, so yeah, casualties after the show. It was exactly how I'd want to spend, because that was like a Monday night or a Tuesday night or something like that. And you know, I don't really party super hard these days, and so I was stoked that they were like, I was like, so what do you guys want to do after the show? They're like, let's go to the shop, man. You got the keys, right? Let's go. I want to see the record store. And so we ended up going there at whatever, 2 a.m. And yeah, I mean, they spent probably an hour just digging through records, asking about different pressings. So you put this one on. How's this sound? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But yeah, it's always fun anytime. Because yeah, I love the ritual of record shopping, and everyone has their own kind of ritual, and different friend groups do it differently and all that. And it's kind of fun to watch other people interact. That's honestly one of my favorite things about having the shop, is being up there, and then when people come to the counter, I'm always like, oh, what'd you get? What'd you end up buying? You know, and then just talking about records with them. But
That's super cool. And has there been somebody that's walked in that kind of caught you off guard, took you by surprise, and you were like stoked that they were there?
I mean, for sure. I mean, the one that comes to my mind immediately is, and I'm so bad. This is it's a good example of like someone that I know is a big deal, but I'm also like I'm not good at paying attention to other worlds.
Uh-huh.
But I think Matt Hoffman is the BMX rider. He's like a big deal there. But his son plays in bands and stuff like that. And so there was a DIY music venue across the street for a year or two. And I guess his son's band was playing at the DIY spot. And so he was there, and they all came in and bought some records, stuff like that.
That's awesome. You mentioned like somebody asked, you know, the Casualties asking you, hey, throw this record on, let's hear it, you know. Some of my earliest experiences record shopping, there was a store here in Oklahoma City called Music Dimensions, which I was telling Renee when she was on. That's where I saw Blank 77 for the first time. They would bring bands through there. But it's also where I discovered a lot of records of bands that I still love today. The first time I heard Defiance was there.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where, like, I looked at the album cover, and I was like, man, that looks fucking cool. And then I saw the back cover, and I was like, if this band sounds as tough as they look, then I'm going to like this. And so I asked the guy if he would throw it on for me so I could hear a song. And he said, sure. And so, like, right away, I was hooked. I was like, man, that sounds fucking rad. What about for you guys? Are there is there one or two records that come to mind immediately that you had that same experience with that you still love today?
Oh, I definitely. I mean, first off, just the ritual of buying records. I know that's not where the question ended up, but halfway through it, I was just thinking about the record store that I grew up going to all the time, and mainly just the experiences of going there probably formed me wanting to own a record store. Where Vertigo in Grand Rapids, it's still there. Herm, the owner, still the owner. He used to call my dad's house phone anytime that like a cool used punk collection came in. I'd run up there. But you know, I definitely love all of the ritual of that. I can't say that I remember specifically being inside of a record store and having that first listen moment with a band. That being said, I mean, yeah, I feel like when you're a teenager is when a lot of that happens.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, me and my friends had a band, Chernobyl Babies, and me and Sean, the singer, used to spend all day, every day, just hanging out, listening to punk music, talking about punk music. And Sean would honestly show me a lot of the stuff that kind of like shaped my taste in music. And so I remember specifically that Discogs record, Long Live Oi. That was a huge one for me, especially at the time, like, you know, like Good Charlotte and stuff was on MTV and whatever, and they'd wear band like Casualties T-shirts and stuff on TV, which was great for those guys. But for me, I'm like, yo, this is mine. Like I wanted something that was mine, and I remember the Discogs very much feeling like that. I'm like, no one I knew at the time knew that band, you know, and honestly, for the rest of my life, I have a Discogs tattoo on the back of my arm, and like for the rest of my life, I can't count how many long-term friendships started by meeting someone and then recognizing that tattoo or that band coming up and us talking and relating on it. And then like next thing I know, 15 years have passed and me and that person are still friends, you know?
That's awesome, because that's like a true testament to the power of music and how it unites us as a community.
Absolutely.
Michelle, how about you? Is there one of those records for you?
Well, it's hard. So he has this great story about growing up and having like cool stuff to do in Grand Rapids, but I grew up in Sand Springs, which is a suburb of Tulsa. So there was never anything super cool happening here. No cool record stores to go to. I wish when I was younger, Boulevard Trash existed and I could have a cool place to go and find records. But so kind of for that reason, I didn't even collect records when I was younger, when I was growing up or anything. Of course, I still listened to music, just not the records. The closest one was Size Records in Oklahoma City.
Right.
And so anytime me and my friends would go to Oklahoma City to see a show at the Conservatory, which is the closest place that a cool punk band would play, we would go into Size Records and thought it was super cool and all that, but I just like never got to have a cool store in Tulsa.
Oh, and that's another one of those things that we still enjoy today is anytime we're in Boulevard Trash and anytime you see some young kid come in and you know, having that experience, you know, and maybe I'm just like, you know, too nostalgic about that stuff, or maybe it was too important to me, but like I'll see kids like showing each other records or whatever, and I'm just like,
it's cool.
They
it's
might
cool
remember that for the rest of their life. I can remember some of those.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It is cool to see like the younger kids come in here in Tulsa because, I mean, like I said, when I look back, I wish there was some place to go when I was younger, but it was just 2 hours to Oklahoma City. It didn't exist in Tulsa, yeah. So it's cool for them, for sure.
Yeah, that store, Size Records, the guy that ran that store, Reggie, is also the guy that was running Music Dimensions.
Okay.
So that was like it's kind of like the same store, different name and a different location.
Yeah.
But the same like mastermind behind that store, you know? But yeah, like I saw so many cool bands there, and like Oklahoma is just, I feel like it's kind of catching up with the times.
Yeah.
But back then, late 90s, early 2000s, fuck, man. It was so hard to do anything cool here, which is a huge reason why I wanted to get the fuck out and go start my own band in California. But I think that in a way, like, because it wasn't easily attainable to do things or go to places like that here, when you did get to experience it, it made it more special.
Definitely, yeah.
And I feel like today we're kind of living in this era that we have this whole instant gratification thing because of the internet. Everything is attainable now, especially music. I mean, there's like a lot of shit that I would never think would end up on Spotify that's fucking on there now.
Yeah.
And I talk with this a lot with guests because I always love to hear their perspective on kind of the old school days compared to today with this whole digital era, and how that's really changed the music scene. For me, I feel it's kind of like a double-edged sword, but I'd love to hear what your perspective is on it.
Yeah, definitely agree. Double-edged sword. It's hard because, yeah, it makes it more easily accessible, which is great for music fans. It's great for bands. It's especially great if you're broke, you know, like, yeah, who can afford to do all the mail order and all that sort of stuff, you know? Like, I'm like, dude, if they, I mean, the internet existed when I was younger. I just didn't have a computer. I didn't do it. I remember other people using it. But I swear to God, the very first time I ever used a computer, I still remember, it was a desktop computer that my mom had gotten and had like sitting in a corner, and I set it up on a table late at night whenever she was asleep, and I tried to figure out how to search for something, and the first website that I tried to go to was angryyoungandpoor.com.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to do it, so I'm like sitting there, you know, putting spaces between words. I didn't know about a www dot. I didn't know if an ampersand would work. You know, like I still remember doing that. You know, so like I think about how great that's got to be for a young kid now to like, yeah, cool. Someone says something about a band, I'll just go fucking check out that band.
I'll just check out their name. I'm sure I'll find it.
see some older dude with a leather jacket with a cool band name on the back. You don't have any awkward conversation where you risk, you know, being humiliated or something like that. You're just like, cool, I'll just
look it up.
Put it on my phone. I'll just Google that shit. So yeah. I mean, like, that's great.
You know, you bring up a perfect example of what it was like in the old school days. I remember going to shows and seeing band logos on dudes' leather jackets and being like, I wonder who that band is. But like, there's no way I was going to go and talk to that dude because one, he was probably like at least 5 years older than I was. And he looked like he would just beat my ass for even asking, you know? But now, yeah, you just look it up on Google or Spotify or Instagram and like, boom, there's this whole world in front of you.
Oh, and not only can you look it up, but you're like, the time between not knowing a band and being able to be in direct contact with members of that band.
Right.
It's like 3 clicks in maybe a minute. You know, that's wild.
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, Good Charlotte, and like that time in that time when a lot of, you know, even punk bands were on MTV or whatever. Like I remember Green Day, like when they first came onto MTV, the first time I saw one of their music videos was for Basket Case, I believe.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was a fucking cool video. And that song was fast. And like, it you know, it was a lot of fun and whatever. And so that band was kind of like one of my like introductions into this whole punk rock realm. And back then it's like, if you wanted to learn more about a band, you kind of wait for like magazines to come out and, you know, see what that had been written about them and whatever. Now you know, that mystique behind the band is fucking gone.
It's true. Which could be a positive or a negative.
Yeah.
You know, like definitely can be a negative because mystique can be great. There's also times where, you know, I didn't have a subscription to, you know, like Maximum Rock and Roll or anything like that. And so honestly, I think I learned the most from punk bands from other friends of mine who said they knew something. That doesn't mean what they told me was true.
Right.
You know? And I very well might still to this day regurgitate some fact about some band that is 100% incorrect. But in my head, I'm like, oh, I've been operating on the assumption that this is the truth for 20, 30, 20 years, you know, like for a long time. So, yeah. So for that sake, you know, it could make it better for someone. Yeah.
Definitely. Since we're on the subject of bands, I'd love to talk about Punx Unite Fest for a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's a stacked lineup, and there's a lot of bands that, you know, I would call the usual suspects. Anybody that's in this scene is familiar with those bands, and they're all fucking cool. But there's also some bands on the flyer this year that haven't been on a Punx Unite Fest or FYWROK Fest previously. And I love talking about some of the newer bands in the scene because I feel like even though music is so much more accessible these days, it's really difficult for newer bands to come out and like make an impression on the scene for whatever reason. And one of the bands that I saw that I had become familiar with recently because of this show, I had interviewed Grimace Records, and most of their bands are based in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
One of those bands is Noogie.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I heard them, I was putting together the playlist to update it, and they were one of the bands. And then fast forward a few weeks later, and I see that their name's on the flyer, which I was fucking excited about. I was like, this is rad. This, kind of up and coming is on there. How did you come across that band and some of the other bands that, like I said, aren't the usual suspects?
Oh, I mean, Noogie's sick. And we've been aware of them for a long time just because proximity-wise, they live in Texas. Oklahoma's not far.
Right.
But especially over the past few years, I mean, COVID, I'm sure, put a damper on it for them like it did for everyone. But they just tour so hard. And I had been aware of their band for a long time, but we didn't really know them personally. And then they played in town a while ago. And so we went out to the show. We happened to also be home. So we went out to the show. And we just started talking to them, and they're super tight people, we just really got along, and I already wanted to have them on the fest because they're putting the work in, and that should be recognized.
Absolutely.
And, but simultaneously, especially after meeting them, I'm like, yo, these guys are awesome. So now I just can't wait to hang out with them more.
When it comes to putting together the fest, is that really a joint effort with the two of you, or is it kind of like your brainchild, Tony? And like, how does that work for you guys?
We'll both talk about bands. We'll both talk about it. Any significant decisions that are made, Michelle is always involved in. I maybe I take that ball and run with it a little bit more than she does, just the same as the Oddities and Curiosities Expo. She takes the ball and runs with on the organizational side more so than I do. So
I feel like we have so much going on that we kind of like delegate who's going to handle certain things more. I mean, obviously everything is like a joint decision, or we talk about everything on all business fronts, but he definitely handles more of like FYWROK and Punx Unite. I handle more of the Oddities, handles more Boulevard, I handle more Boomtown. So it's like we kind of like divide and conquer and then come together, because we quickly realize when there's so much going on, like we need one of us to put full attention towards one thing while the other one is still like handling something else. So I feel like it's really worked out to do it like that. But especially this year, I've been so consumed with the shows, with the Oddity shows, that I don't think I really had much to do with Punx Unite this year at all, besides.
Well, it's like it was a lot of us talking, but it'd be like, also like every decision can't be committee when you're trying to cover a lot of ground quickly. Sometimes it's just decisions just have to be made, and then you talk about it later, and then you can decide together if something was a good or bad decision. But so there would be a lot of me being like, okay, well, such and such band said that they're going to do this, or so-and-so is going to get back to me on something. And she'd be like, oh, I didn't even know that you reached out to Defiance, but I'm glad to hear that Mike got back to you.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, you brought up Fuck You, We Rule, which if anybody is newer to the scene, they might not be familiar with that. There was a transition over the last couple of years, taking the fest and changing the name and changing the location. It was based here in Oklahoma and Tulsa since its inception, and then it's been relocated to Denver. Let's talk a little bit about that. How did that come together? Obviously, Punx Unite is part of Charged Record, Jake Casualty's thing. And so it makes a lot of sense from a branding perspective to do it that way. But how did that conversation start? What set everything in motion for that?
Well, I mean, we had done the fest for years here in Tulsa, and it was always fun, always a party. There were some businesses in town that enjoyed it more than others, and some that had a really rough go of it and just didn't like it at all.
I think the hotels are happy they're not here anymore.
Yeah. I think hotels are probably going to throw a party on 4th of July weekend that we're not here. But yeah, and Jake was always a big supporter of Fuck You, We Rule. I think he came out to the second one just as an attendee, and he just was stoked on it. He ended up, he like came and he brought a bunch of records, and like maybe 2 days beforehand was like, "Can I DJ like a brunch thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And and so he, we've always gotten along real well. And I think at some point we just started talking about the idea of it, because from a logistical standpoint, doing it in Tulsa was just bad for attendees. Where we were like, man, I love that it gets all these people to come to the city that we live in. And I love seeing Tulsa streets full of punks, and, it's a great time. But like Tulsa's airport's tiny, so the flights are expensive for everybody. The hotels were only being less and less accommodating after years of like raucous parties and stuff like that. So we're like, man, it's kind of like fucked up that people are having plane tickets that cost 2 to 3 times more than some other cities. And then they come here and they're treated like dirt by the staff at a hotel that they're paying their hard-earned money to. Yeah. And so for those reasons, that was the reason that we moved it to Denver, is we were just like, it's a bigger airport, so it'll be cheaper flights for everybody. And in the hotels, it's a kind of hipper town, so the hotels will be more on board for, be more casual about, people drinking or whatever. But.
Yeah, when that was announced, actually, I think even before it was announced, you and I might have talked about it on the phone. I can't remember. But I thought, like, well, that's fucking cool to call it Punx Unite. And I thought, like, again, like from a branding and like marketing perspective, like that was really smart. And it was cool that Jake was bringing back that compilation. I mean, I have the first one, when it first came out, I was like, whoa, this is fucking rad. And so to see him bring it back was really exciting. And like that year, it just felt like, oh man, like something's on the horizon. Like feels like the scene is kind of like gearing up for like a new like rejuvenation of some sort. And then COVID came and fucked all of us in the ass.
Yeah.
COVID came and fucked everybody.
We felt this way very much.
I know from my perspective, during that time, I mean, the Havoc was kind of gearing up to like get out there and start doing some shit and whatever. But obviously, like once you started hearing about all these things closing down and like whatever, it's kind of like, oh man, like we're going to have to reevaluate everything.
Yeah.
What was that process like for you guys? Because I'm sure with having so many different things going on and then having to take a step back and reevaluate and allow things to kind of come into focus with that current landscape. How did that impact you guys, and what did you do with your time during all of that?
It impacted us like pretty bad.
Yeah.
Not only was the fest canceled, but we had 25 oddity shows scheduled, or 26 scheduled, and we only had 4. So all of those other dates that were canceled, it was just an absolute mess dealing with rescheduling. First off, when everyone was like, we'll
6
give it
weeks.
a couple months, yeah, we'll be good. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds great.
I felt so bad, Michelle. So for these Oddities expos, to give a quick little example of the volume she's dealing with is, let's say there's 200 vendors at each expo, which, most times there's more. But let's say there's only 200, and let's say that the booking process goes perfectly and it's like 3 emails back and forth. That's still, like 600 emails times 26 expos that year.
Right.
Just for the booking, the vendor side of it, not even the building or anything like that. And so when everyone thought that COVID would be, a month or two, all these buildings just wanted to push the date back.
Right.
So then, she's doing all these emails and getting all of this going, and then right when it would line up, turns out, a month later, it's still
Just
bad.
kidding.
So I think we did that treadmill. I say we. She did that treadmill
We
multiple times, and then finally we made the call, and we were like,
Yeah.
all right, we're just done this year.
Yeah, it was a nightmare for sure.
Yeah.
And then, with that all happening, like the city, Oklahoma didn't really do very much.
Right.
And so, but there was a small time in Tulsa where Boulevard Trash was closed, Boomtown was closed, or no, we didn't have Boomtown yet, sorry. So just Boulevard Trash, but it was closed to the public, and we were like, what the hell? Every single thing we do just came to a complete stop. So it definitely sucked. In that downtime though, without having the shows and without traveling, we spent a lot of time up at Boulevard, and we did a lot of online business, which was awesome. And we felt that it was because people couldn't go to shows. They couldn't go see bands live, so they were buying more records. And so it was really cool. We got to spend a lot of time up there. And then outside of that, we just spent a lot of time at home, which I look back and I was like, that was so
great.
nice, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be back traveling a lot and doing our thing. But yeah, it was a kind of a nightmare to deal with in general. It had its ups and downs though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely something significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious if that time, it kind of forced you guys to put the brakes on so many things. But did it also just enable you to just spend more time together and just focus on your relationship and just enjoying being with one another?
Yeah, we spend every single second together anyways. Which we like.
No,
I don't know, I guess some people can't do that, but we just
It didn't
just
change
do
our
life.
life on that front whatsoever.
So it was great though to not be working, because a lot of time, we're spending time together every single day, all day, but it's almost like work. We're working together, we're talking about work, we're doing whatever.
Yeah.
But this was, we hung out on our hammock every day with our dogs, and it was just nice to do really wholesome things like that. No work, a lot of the time we were talking about oh my god, our life is ruined. It's fucking ruined now. So everything we've worked for is just being crumbling in front of us. But it was a lot of good times and memories that I won't forget now, of just the downtime of doing nothing.
Well, and we still found ways to have fun just out in the middle of nowhere or whatever.
Yeah.
We went and saw
hiking
them.
a lot.
Yeah, like everyone else. We went and saw some buffalo.
Yeah.
Then we drove out to New Mexico for a week and just hung out in the desert.
It was cool.
Well, people like yourselves, I felt the worst for during the pandemic, because so many small businesses closed.
Yeah.
And when you are an entrepreneur, it literally is a dream, and you're doing everything you can to keep that dream alive. But when something like that comes along and you have no control over it, I can't imagine how devastating that must feel, because it's just this huge moment of helplessness.
Yeah.
But it's awesome you guys were able to maintain things and still keep businesses open and plan for the future. And now we're starting to see a lot of those plans are coming to fruition.
Yeah. No, it definitely feels Good. I mean, and especially, on the Oddities Expo side of it, where a lot of these are, happening at venues that are owned by the city. So Michelle's in direct contact with the local health departments and all that sort of stuff. It's just, we're still not out of the woods on the COVID front, but it is nice to start to feel like you see a light at the end of the tunnel, or, it definitely feels, knock on wood, like, oh man, we can kind of hope, now, or now you can start kind of planning with a certain degree of certainty that, like, the world that will look similar next month as it does right now, which for the past couple of years, all of us collectively haven't been able to rely on,
For sure.
I'm going to take a moment and ask the audience that if they have any questions, go ahead and submit them, because we are starting to run out of time. I have been very selfish during this interview and just asking all the questions because I just enjoyed learning so much about both of you. But if you are watching this live stream right now and you have questions for Tony and Michelle about whatever they're involved with, their Oddities Expo, Punx Unite Fest, Boulevard Trash, Boomtown Teas, The Wheels, whatever. Now's a good time to do that before we run out of time. Having said that, let's talk a little bit more about The Wheels. I was not sure if we were going to have any time to get into this at all. And I was hoping that we would. And I would actually love to have a separate episode where we just talk about The Wheels. But I know it's a fun project for you, Tony. Let's talk a little bit about just that part of your life. How did that all come together? What are you working on now with that? What's new with it?
Oh, The Wheels is super fun. It's all fun. So, brief history on me. Prior to living in Oklahoma, I had a band called Al and the Black Cats that did a bunch of touring, mainly in Europe. I think we did 20 European tours, toured Japan, a bunch of U.S. tours. And it was very like business, everything was a contract. Everything had managers and booking agents and, publishing companies and all this sort of stuff. And it just sucks all the fun out of music. And so I knew that we were going to stop really doing that. And so when I first moved to Tulsa, I just started kind of writing some punk songs that I liked. No real plans on playing any shows or doing anything real with it. And then we happened to be going to Denver. And so I hit up Steve Stackhouse from Potato Pirates because I love his drumming and I love watching him drum. He's a super entertaining drummer and incredibly talented. And so I just asked him, like, hey, like, I wrote these songs. I want to record them just so I have them. Would you drum on them? Like, would you be into that? And he was super into the idea. And so then we went and recorded it. And then Gordy, our bass player, the singer of Bad English, our bass player, nowadays, he's killing it at it. He gets better every day. But when we did those recordings, he came to the session just because he's our bud and he wanted to hang out. And he heard the songs and he liked them. He goes, this is sick. I'm the bass player now. I go, Gordy, you don't play bass. And he goes, Sid can do it, so can I. And so from that moment forward, he was our bass player. And yeah, that's been like kind of the running gag. And over the years, he's been practicing. He's gotten better and better at it. And but the whole idea of the project is like, this is 100% fun. If it's not fun, we're not doing it. They all have band projects that are serious projects and can take serious discussion. But I don't know if we've ever had a serious conversation related to The Wheels. It very much is. I think when we said we were going to do our first live show, I said, okay, well, we'll start playing some shows, but we're only going to do this if it's always fun and it only loses money.
Gotta buy all that silly street.
Yeah. They're like, deal. Yeah, so basically, anything that the venue gives us for playing, we'll either put into silly string or travel or whatever, or tipping out the bartenders or tipping out anyone who helps us clean up afterward. And yeah, that's that. It just does what it does, and it's super fun to have a project like that where it's just like, this is just pure passion project,
I love a couple of things about that. First of all, I love that Gordy, like, there was no band meeting or anything.
No.
Just a fucking proclamation.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's happening, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'm the bass player now.
That is hilarious. But the other thing I love about it is I feel like the Wheels and that music, in a lot of ways, is kind of like the musical manifestation of your personality.
Yeah.
And you and I, we had talked over the phone multiple times before we had ever met in person.
Yeah.
And every time I got on the phone with you, I was like, man, that guy's super upbeat. Like, it's easy to have a good conversation with him. And then hanging out with you in person, it's like that times 10, And what I love about that is, like, when I was kind of coming up in the scene in the early days for me, there was so much this attitude of, like, just straight fuck you. I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. Don't fucking talk to me. Like, I'm a badass.
Yeah.
And it was rare to see people at shows, from my perspective.
Yeah.
In my experience, rare seeing people at shows that were like lighthearted and fun and, just easy to talk to. So I love that you just kind of embody that side of punk rock, which I think is super important. Renee Blanks and I were talking about that because she has that same kind of vibe.
Oh, Renee's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. She's so much fun, but like for you coming up in the scene, did you have a lot of those same experiences with people that you thought like just took themselves too seriously?
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely, I think I just get it from my dad. My dad is a super fun, easy guy to talk to. So I though I appreciate that you think that of me, it really isn't something I strive for or do intentionally. I'm just act how I act. But
it's just him. He's just positive, so outgoing.
But yeah, no, I remember people always kind of act tough or whatever. But honestly, I've always it was never something I do intentionally, but I'd just always be how I am, and I would so often have kind of like the biggest, scariest kind of looking guys in the room always end up being like the nicest guys. And I can't count how many times when I was younger. One time specifically, I remember I was playing a show in Columbia, Missouri, and a guy I'm still friends with to this day, Jesse Garcia. He's a kind of big, tough, mean looking, kind of New York hardcore style dude. And he said, after the first time we met, we were drinking together that night, and he goes, man, I knew I was going to get along great with you when you jumped out of your guys' van after showing up to the show an hour and a half late, and you ran up to me, a scary looking dude, looking pissed off, standing outside, like looking at his watch. And I ran up and I just like laughed and go, man, I'm so sorry for being late, and just ran up and give him a big old hug. He's like, I don't think I've ever had a stranger that I'm kind of annoyed at just walk up and give me a hug. He goes, man, I just knew I'd get along great with you. And I mean, to this day, we're still buds.
That is too funny. Michelle, is that part of what attracted you to Tony?
I mean, yeah, he's so outgoing, whereas I am less outgoing. But I feel like I'm pretty outgoing, but not like on this level. Like I feel like I can't sometimes just keep going, whereas he's just always so happy and positive. But I think that's like, I mean, I love everything about him, but a great quality.
Michelle's business end of stuff. So, like she's got to be mindful of the big picture. Meanwhile, you know, like I'll spend 10 minutes talking to the mailman.
And I'm like, okay, we shut the fuck up. We have to go.
That is too good. Before we wrap this up, we actually do have an audience question. So I'm going to bring that up right now. Our good friends at Dismantled Records.
Mm-hmm.
Any hope for a Chernobyl Babies reunion gig?
Yeah, I'd be into it. I honestly, I keep meaning, this is a perfect example of the sort of thing that, you know, we just have so much on our plate that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. I've been meaning to, we all got to talk about it, but if there were, you know, one, I would like it to be with as many original members as are living. So, so yeah, I gotta talk to Sean and Matt and Ty about it, but I think I'd be game for something like that. I think it'd be sick. So,
Awesome.
I've been meaning to, and I don't know if I'm spoiler alert, and that's another problem with me talking too much is like, sometimes I talk too much. But we already got offered a show that I'd love to do. So, so if it can work out, I need to have that conversation, and who knows, maybe one will be announced real soon.
Awesome. I have one last question for you before we wrap this up. I don't know how many times I've been scrolling on Facebook and I've seen the advertisement for the Oddities Expo happening in Tulsa. And every time I see it, I look at the flyer image for it and I'm like, that looks so fucking good. Who did that? And the first person that comes to mind is Hagen the Pagan. Did he do that?
No, Alex didn't do it, but fucking Hagen rules. I love
He does, yeah.
No, a buddy of ours named Woody, and I'm not even going to attempt his last name because I'd murder it. But he lives in the Czech Republic, and he's just an amazing illustrator. I first became aware of his work there's a festival in Czech named Mighty Sounds, and always great lineups, killer festival. And they've been doing it for probably, if not 20 years, then damn near. And he's been doing the art the entire time. And when I was long before we organized any festivals or the Oddities Expo, I always saw the art for that festival over there, and I always thought, man, that art is so good. And so whenever we were talking about Oddities Expo art years ago, I was like, we need to reach out. I found out who did it. We need to reach out to him. And since then, I mean, he's done the flyers for us now for
a few years,
a couple years. Yeah. T-shirt designs before that.
He's so great. Like, we're like, okay, so we want some creepy jars with stuff in it, and we'll just like tell him this crazy idea that most people will be like, what the fuck? And he just shows us, we're like, that's it.
There needs to be an eyeball with tentacles coming out of the back of it, you know, or whatever.
He gets it.
Well, one of the things that caught my attention with that flyer that I thought was so cool is that the coin has the state of Oklahoma on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you guys have different ones made for each state and you changed the image on the coin?
Yeah.
Yes. So every state, like every flyer, every year has the state hidden in it somewhere.
Wow.
So this year, it was on the coin, and I was like, that is the perfect spot to put each state. So, yeah, every state we go to, it has the outline of the state this year.
Very cool. I love seeing all the different work that you guys do because it's obviously rooted in creativity. And I had announced you guys coming onto this show last week and had said something to the effect of just like, you're such important members of the scene with the things that you do behind the scenes that people aren't aware of. So I was really glad that you were able to make time to be on this show and talk about your world because there's just so much in it. And I want to thank you, not just for your time, but everything that you guys do for the scene. And before we wrap it up, if there's anything that you guys would like to shout out, anything that you want to plug. I know that Punx Unite Fest tickets are on sale. They're selling well, but there's still more available. Is there anything else that you guys would like to promote?
All right, let's see. What's the hit list? Punx Unite tickets are available now, but they're going fast. Grab them while you can. If we're coming to your city with an Oddities and Curiosities Expo and you want to come hang out and check that out, please do. We just repressed a Wheels 7-inch through Boulevard Trash. And so if you like the wheels or you like silly stuff, scope that out. What else we got going on? Punk Rock Flea Market in Tulsa will be September 4th. I don't even think that's announced yet, but I'm doing it now.
I guess now. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think that's about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, to anybody watching, there are Instagram profiles for everything that you guys are involved with. And you can find them just by searching on Instagram. It's probably the easiest way. And if you're ever in the state of Oklahoma, especially Tulsa, pay a visit to Boulevard Trash. It's a great store. You're going to find more than music there. Having said that, again, thank you so much, Tony and Michelle, for being on with me today. I look forward to seeing you in person in the future. And best of luck with the festival and the expos that are coming up. You guys are awesome. Just keep kicking ass.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I had a blast. Fun talking about punk.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to everyone watching, tune in next week when my guests will be Oddities.
Oddities!
If you're not familiar with this band, you should be. They're fucking awesome. They've got a new album coming out called In Punk We Thrash. There's a new music video out of the title track. It kicks ass. I fucking love it. I can't wait to have them on here. So tune in next week for that. And to play us out, this is Just Like Clockwork by the Lower Class Brats. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.